This video takes a cheesy deep dive into America's biggest pizza chains, exposing which ones look tempting on the outside but leave you full of regret. From soggy crusts to tasteless toppings, we'll rank the worst offenders while highlighting the two standouts that still deliver real satisfaction. By the end, you'll know exactly which pizza chains to avoid at all costs, and the two that are actually worth it. Let's kick things off with the chain that promises quick delivery, but too often leaves you regretting your choice with soggy crusts and tasteless toppings. Domino's Pizza. For years, Domino's has lived on the promise of being fast. The commercials drilled it into our heads, 30 minutes or less or it's free. And sure, the delivery driver would pull up in record time, but what arrived in that cardboard box was not always something to celebrate. The crust often feels limp, as if it soaked up steam during the car ride, and instead of a golden crunch, you end up with a chewy, spongy base. Pizza should be a treat, not a chore to chew through. The cheese is another letdown. It has that processed, rubbery stretch that never really melts into the sauce. Instead of bubbling up into a blanket of flavor, it just lies there, clinging to the crust in a waxy layer. And when you pull a slice, you either get no cheese string at all, or the kind of stretchy pull that reminds you more of elastic than dairy. Pair that with toppings that taste tired, mushrooms that feel canned, pepperoni that is more grease than spice, and vegetables that seem like they were frozen solid a day ago. And you have a recipe for disappointment. Then there is the sauce. Domino's sauce has been called tangy, but the tang often leans more towards sweet and artificial than fresh and savory. It is like ketchup's older cousin trying to pass itself off as Italian. Instead of enhancing the crust and toppings, it drowns them in sugar and salt. You take a few bites, and instead of enjoying a balanced flavor, you are reaching for a drink to wash it down. Of course, Domino's has tried to reinvent itself. Remember when they ran ads admitting their pizza was not good and promising to change? It was bold marketing, and they did improve the crust recipe slightly. But let's be honest, even with the new look, Domino's still tastes like a pizza designed in a lab for speed and cost, not for flavor. Price-wise, Domino's can seem like a good deal. The coupons, the mix and match deals, the 2-for-1 specials, it feels like you are getting value. But cheap does not always mean good. At the end of the day, you might save a few dollars, but you also save yourself the enjoyment of a truly satisfying pizza night. The sad truth is that Domino's succeeds at being fast, but fails at being memorable. You do not crave Domino's because of the taste, you crave it because of the convenience. And when pizza becomes more about timing than flavor, it is already in the wrong category. Question: do you think fast delivery makes up for mediocre taste, or should pizza always be worth the wait? Next up is the better ingredients promise that sounds too good to be true, because what you get is a pizza that barely hits the mark: Papa John's. For years, Papa John's built its entire identity on a catchy slogan: better ingredients, better pizza. The words stick in your head and you start to believe that maybe this chain is different. Maybe you are getting something fresher, something crafted with care. But one bite in and the illusion often crumbles faster than the crust in your hand. The crust is soft and pale with none of the crispness or chew that makes pizza dough shine. It is almost like bread that was half-baked and then rushed out the door. And while Domino's crust leans greasy, Papa John's crust is bland, a canvas with no flavor to carry the rest of the pizza. They even toss in that little tub of garlic butter sauce with every order, almost as if they know the crust is not good enough to stand on its own. Dip it or drown it, that is the only way it becomes edible. The toppings do not help much. The pepperoni tends to curl up into little grease cups, but instead of tasting spicy and rich, it tastes heavy and oily. The sausage has that telltale factory-made texture, more filler than meat. Vegetables are limp, watery, and rarely taste fresh. Even the cheese, which should be the star, often feels flat. More like a topping glued on top than a melted, flavorful part of the whole. The sauce leans sweet with an almost candy-like aftertaste. It does not balance the saltiness of the cheese and toppings. Instead, it competes with them. The result is a pizza that feels like it is trying too hard to be bold, but ends up tasting like a sugar-coated version of the real thing. Of course, Papa John's has had its share of headlines, and not always for the right reasons. But setting the drama aside, the core issue is simple. The pizza itself is not special. If you blindfolded someone and handed them a slice, chances are they would not guess it came from the better ingredients place. They would just say it tastes like another average, mass-produced pizza. Price-wise, Papa John's is usually more expensive than Domino's or Little Caesars, but the quality does not always justify the difference. Paying more should mean better flavor, fresher ingredients, and a pizza that stands out. Instead, what you often get feels like paying a premium for marketing, not for food. In the end, Papa John's pizza is all about promises, not delivery. The slogan says better, but your taste buds say otherwise. Question: do you think catchy slogans actually make food taste better? Or do they just trick us into giving it another try? Sliding into the list is the so-called hot and ready pizza. But with flavors so flat, you might wonder if they forgot the cheese. Little Caesars. On paper, Little Caesars sounds like the ultimate deal. $5 for a whole pizza, hot and ready at a moment's notice. No waiting, no delivery fee, just instant gratification. It is the kind of promise that appeals to families, late-night snackers, and anyone on a tight budget. But once you open the box, the cracks in that deal start to show. The crust is often thin and underwhelming, more like cardboard than bread. It does not have the chew, the crunch, or the depth of flavor you would expect from a good pizza dough. Instead, it acts like a flimsy platform just sturdy enough to carry toppings from the box to your mouth. You can fold a slice in half, and it will still sag like a wet paper plate. The cheese, when it shows up, feels more like a topping sprinkle than a real layer. There is rarely enough of it, and what you do get does not melt into that gooey blanket that makes pizza crave-worthy. It often looks stiff, almost plastic-like, with no satisfying pull when you lift a slice. The flavor is equally faint, making you wonder if they rationed it out to save on cost. The sauce has a bit of tang, but it is thin and easily drowned out by the grease from the pepperoni. Speaking of which, the pepperoni is the one topping you can usually count on, but it comes at the cost of leaving orange puddles across the surface. Take a napkin to blot the excess, and you will go through half the roll before you finish a single slice. To their credit, Little Caesars does not pretend to be gourmet. They market themselves as cheap, fast, and available, and in that sense, they deliver exactly what they promise. But if you are after flavor, texture, or satisfaction, this is not the pizza for you. It is the kind of pizza you settle for, not the kind you look forward to. The real danger is nostalgia. Many of us remember grabbing a Little Caesars pizza on the way home from school or after a game. It was cheap. It was there. And as kids, we did not mind the flaws. But as adults, when taste matters more than price, the magic quickly disappears. At the end of the day, Little Caesars feels like the fast food version of pizza. Good for a quick fix, but not for an actual meal you want to savor. Question: do you think pizza should ever be judged on price alone, or is taste the only thing that really matters? Coming in next is the chain that is famous for its stuffed crust, but it is more of a gimmick than a satisfying meal, leaving you with dough that is too thick and cheese that is too greasy. Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut was once the crown jewel of American pizza chains. In the 1980s and 1990s, sitting down in a red-roofed Pizza Hut felt like a family event. The red cups, the salad bar, the little personal pan pizzas brought straight to your table in cast iron pans. It felt cozy, like pizza was being taken seriously. But over the years, the magic faded, and the quality seemed to take a backseat to gimmicks. The crust tells the story first. Pan pizzas come out heavy, with a thick, greasy bottom that tastes more like fried bread than pizza dough. The stuffed crust, once an exciting innovation, has turned into a rubbery ring of cheese that adds bulk without flavor. And the regular crust? Often dry, often bland, and never the star of the show. Instead of being the foundation that ties everything together, the crust feels like an afterthought, there only to hold the toppings. Speaking of toppings, Pizza Hut does not shine there either. The pepperoni is usually greasy to the point of leaving puddles, and the sausage has that same manufactured, filler-heavy taste you find at other mass chains. The vegetables feel tired and often overcooked. By the time you reach the second slice, everything blends into one greasy, salty mess. Then there is the cheese. Pizza Hut leans on volume, piling it on thick. But thick does not equal good. The cheese can feel rubbery and overwhelming, especially when paired with the heavy crust. Instead of melting into gooey perfection, it clumps and slides, leaving uneven bites. The more you eat, the more it feels like a chore, not a treat. The sauce is another weak link. It has that mass-produced sweetness that does not taste fresh or balanced. Instead of supporting the cheese and toppings, it competes with them. You take a bite and taste more sugar than tomato, more salt than seasoning. Price-wise, Pizza Hut has moved up into the more expensive category of pizza chains, especially compared to Little Caesars or Domino's. But higher cost should mean better quality, and that is where Pizza Hut fails. You end up paying more for a brand name and gimmicks like stuffed crust without actually getting a pizza that delivers. Nostalgia may tempt people back, but one slice is often enough to remind you that Pizza Hut is better in memory than in reality. Question: do you think stuffed crust is a fun invention or just a clever trick to distract from bad pizza? Here's a blast from the past where nostalgia might make you smile, but the pizza definitely will not, with doughy crusts and toppings that never live up to the hype. Chuck E. Cheese pizza. For most people, Chuck E. Cheese is less about the food and more about the memory. The games, the tokens, the tickets spilling out of the machines, the animatronic band on stage. It was an event. Kids loved it, parents tolerated it, and pizza was simply part of the package. But when you look at it strictly as food, Chuck E. Cheese pizza has never been worth writing home about. The crust is almost always soft and doughy, with none of the crispness or chew that makes pizza fun to bite into. It feels like it was stretched quickly and baked without much care, more bread than crust. Sometimes it even arrives uneven, with slices that vary in size and doneness, like someone was rushing through the motions. The cheese is just as uninspired. It melts unevenly and sometimes feels more like a topping sprinkle than a full layer. It stretches, sure, but in that rubbery, artificial way that does not bring comfort. The flavor is faint, and it does not add much to the experience. The sauce is plain, bordering on forgettable. Instead of adding zest or tang, it acts like a red paint layer. There for color, not taste. The pepperoni or sausage on top usually tastes generic, greasy and salty, with no spice or character. Vegetables, when they appear, feel like an afterthought, limp and lifeless from the oven. Of course, most people were not there for the pizza. The appeal of Chuck E. Cheese was the arcade games, the play areas, and the atmosphere of a kid's birthday party turned loose. The pizza was just fuel to keep the kids going. But for adults, taking that first bite often felt like punishment rather than reward. Price-wise, Chuck E. Cheese pizzas are not cheap either. Parents often paid more than what the quality deserved because the pizza was tied to the overall experience. The games made it worth it, but the food on its own never came close. When you strip away the nostalgia and the flashing lights, what you are left with is one of the weakest pizza offerings from any chain. Question: do you think nostalgia makes bad pizza taste better, or does it just trick us into tolerating it? Rolling in next is the all-you-can-eat buffet, but do not expect quality here. Just pizza that is fast, forgettable, and often more about quantity than taste. Cicis Pizza. Cicis built its entire brand on one idea: unlimited pizza for one low price. For families, it was a bargain. Kids could load their plates with endless slices, try out wacky toppings, and go back again and again. Parents saw it as value for money. But when you focus on quantity, quality is the first thing to disappear. The crusts at Cicis are usually thin and undercooked, lacking the chew or crunch that makes a good pizza base. Many pies sit under heat lamps too long, drying out and losing any chance of tasting fresh. You grab a slice and it already feels tired, limp, and lifeless. The cheese is often skimpy. Instead of a full blanket that bubbles and stretches, you get uneven coverage that leaves parts of the crust bare. It melts into pools in some spots and disappears in others. And because it sits out on the buffet line, it hardens quickly, losing any joy that cheese should bring. The sauce is usually bland, watery, and thin. It is there, but barely noticeable, often drowned out by grease or dried out from sitting too long. Toppings are inconsistent. One pie may be overloaded with pepperoni, while another barely has a sprinkle. Vegetables are usually soggy, sausage tastes processed, and nothing really comes together. To be fair, Cicis never claimed to be gourmet. The draw was always the buffet. Eat as much as you want for a fixed price. And for kids or teens, that was exciting. But for adults looking for flavor, Cicis is a disappointment. You fill your stomach, but you rarely feel satisfied. Price-wise, Cicis is cheap, but cheap is the point. The trade-off is clear: you get unlimited pizza, but none of it is worth remembering. After 2 or 3 slices, you start to notice how bland and repetitive it all is. Nostalgia plays a role here too. For some, Cicis was a hangout after school or a weekend treat. But as taste buds mature, the flaws are impossible to ignore. Question: would you rather have one really good pizza or unlimited bad pizza for the same price? Here is the pizza you settle for when you are stuck in a mall food court. And it is about as satisfying as chewing on cardboard. Sbarro. For decades, Sbarro has been a mall staple. You spot that bright sign while walking past the food court? The glass display cases full of oversized slices sitting under warming lights? And you think, that looks decent enough. The idea is simple. Quick pizza by the slice for shoppers on the go. But the moment you actually sit down and take a bite, the cracks begin to show. The crust is usually the first disappointment. Thick, chewy, and dry all at once, it feels more like a block of bread than a pizza base. There is no crispness, no golden bite, just a dense slab that weighs down the slice. Folded in half New York style, and it still cracks instead of bending. Instead of feeling light and airy, it feels heavy and joyless. Then there is the cheese. Instead of melting into a creamy, gooey topping, it often looks stiff, hardened by too many minutes under a heat lamp. Pull a slice and the cheese slides off in clumps, leaving bare patches of sauce behind. Worse still, the cheese often has a processed taste that lingers long after the bite is gone. The sauce is no savior either. It is thin, overly sweet, and spread unevenly across the crust. Sometimes you get too much, drowning the slice in watery tomato, and other times you barely get a smear. The balance just is not there. It feels less like sauce and more like someone painted the crust red for appearances. Toppings do not help much. Pepperoni is usually thin, curled, and greasy, sitting in puddles that drip onto the paper plate. Sausage tastes overly processed, and vegetables are limp from overcooking. By the time you are halfway through, the whole thing tastes like it has been sitting around far too long. Price-wise, Sbarro is not even a bargain. For a single slice, you often pay as much as you would for a whole Little Caesars pizza, and yet the quality is worse. The idea of buying by the slice sounds appealing, but the execution leaves you feeling like you overpaid for stale bread with melted plastic on top. Sbarro thrives on location, not flavor. People buy it because it is there when hunger strikes in a mall, an airport, or a train station. It is pizza as fuel, not pizza as food. But when you think about pizza the way it is meant to be, warm, flavorful, comforting, Sbarro feels like a hollow imitation. Question: have you ever bought a Sbarro slice just because you were starving and instantly regretted it halfway through? On the brighter side, here is the pizza chain that surprises with fresher toppings, flavorful crust, and cheese that actually tastes like the real deal. Marco's Pizza. Marco's is not as famous as Domino's or Pizza Hut, but that is part of its charm. It feels like the underdog in the pizza chain wars, quietly delivering a better product without the flashy slogans. Walk into a Marco's and you can actually smell fresh dough baking and toppings being prepped. The first bite usually confirms what your nose already knows. This is a cut above the rest. The crust is where Marco's sets itself apart. It has that golden, slightly crisp outside paired with a soft, chewy inside. Unlike the bland or greasy bases of other chains, this crust has actual flavor. It tastes like bread you want to eat, not just a delivery system for toppings. They even season the edges with herbs and garlic, making the crust a part of the experience instead of something you leave behind. The cheese is another standout. It melts smoothly, stretches without being rubbery, and has that comforting richness that good mozzarella should. Every bite feels balanced. The cheese blends with the sauce and toppings instead of overpowering or disappearing. It is the kind of cheese that makes you look forward to every slice. The sauce strikes the right balance, too. It is tangy without being too sweet, savory without being too salty. Spread evenly, it ties everything together instead of competing for attention. It tastes like someone actually cooked tomatoes down with seasoning, not like it was poured from a bulk container. Toppings at Marco's often taste fresher than the competition. The pepperoni has actual spice and flavor, the sausage feels meaty instead of spongy, and the vegetables are crisp and colorful. Nothing feels like it has been frozen and reheated. You can actually taste the difference. Price-wise, Marco's sits comfortably in the middle. It is not as cheap as Little Caesars, but it also does not reach the inflated prices of Pizza Hut. For what you get, it feels like a fair deal. You are paying for real quality, and that is worth every extra dollar. Marco's proves that a chain can still respect pizza. It may not have the name recognition of the big players, but those who know it understand why it is special. It delivers on flavor, freshness, and satisfaction, three things the other chains often forget. Question: have you ever tried Marco's Pizza? And if so, did it surprise you compared to the bigger chains? And finally, closing on a high note, we have the place that redefines pizza with fresh, innovative toppings and a crispy, thin crust that is anything but ordinary: California Pizza Kitchen. California Pizza Kitchen, or CPK as fans sometimes call it, brought a new kind of energy to the pizza world. Instead of sticking to the same old pepperoni and cheese formula, they leaned into creativity. Think barbecue chicken pizza with smoky sauce, Thai-inspired pies with peanut flavors, or veggie-heavy creations loaded with color and crunch. It is pizza with personality, pizza that feels modern. The crust here is a revelation compared to the heavy, doughy chains. California Pizza Kitchen leans thin, light, and crispy. Every bite has a satisfying snap, but it still holds the toppings without falling apart. It feels less like filler bread and more like an intentional part of the dish, almost like flatbread elevated to an art form. The cheese and toppings are always balanced. Instead of drowning the pie in grease and bulk, they portion things carefully. A barbecue chicken pizza, for example, has just enough smoky sauce to shine without covering up the cheese or crust. Vegetables stay fresh and crisp, not soggy. Even the meats taste like they were prepared for the pizza, not scooped out of a bag. The sauce varies depending on the pizza, and that is part of the fun. Sometimes it is tomato-based, sometimes it is smoky barbecue, sometimes it is something completely unexpected. This variety keeps California Pizza Kitchen interesting in a way most chains never are. Price-wise, yes, California Pizza Kitchen sits higher. It is not the cheapest option, but what you are paying for is innovation and freshness. Compared to shelling out the same money for a greasy stuffed crust Pizza Hut pie, the value feels much stronger here. The overall vibe of California Pizza Kitchen also matters. The restaurants often feel brighter, more welcoming, and more modern than the average chain. Eating here feels like a step up from the standard pizza experience. More of a sit-down meal, less of a rushed takeout. California Pizza Kitchen shows that pizza does not have to be ordinary, and it does not have to drown in cheese and grease to be satisfying. Question: do you like the idea of creative pizzas with unusual toppings, or do you think pizza should always stick to the classics? And there you have it. From cardboard slices to creative crusts, we have taken a full tour of pizza chain highs and lows. So now tell us in the comments which chain you secretly love or love to hate. Hit like if you had fun on this journey, and subscribe to The Hidden Menu for more tasty deep dives.
And remember, the truth is not always on the menu.